morning.
Good morning and welcome. Uh,
Thank you.
well, it's been a while. I know I talked to you on our HBO podcast 6 months, 8 months ago, something like that. I can't remember when it was. Maybe it's been a year. I don't know. It's been a
I
while.
think it's been almost a year. Like time is going by pretty
Yeah,
fast.
it has been flying by. So anyway, well, welcome, Vivica. Can you do me a favor and just kind of let everybody know about your background while we get going here, and then we can get into some
Sure.
questions if you might have. So go ahead and just tell us who you are, where you're from, where you live, what you do, your background, your story, and then we'll get
Mhm.
going. Perfect. Thank you.
Sorry about the screen name. This is like my other kind of path and like it's my other account. So my name is Vivica and I am a nutritionist. I also call myself a holistic practitioner. I studied nutrition for continuing to study for the last 6, 7 years as I've been practicing. And I'm one of the people that started strong with the ketogenic diet about 5 years ago and was probably part of the movement as I started as a blogger, not just a nutritionist, and then began writing cookbooks and was really big in the beginning of the keto movement. And especially because of my own health and life story. Keto was very important for me, probably saved my life. So I became a big promoter of the ketogenic diet. And, you know, because I come from a paleo background and a Western price background, so nourishing diets, traditional, ancestral, I got also really passionate about studying ancestral diets. And that's how I found the Paleolithic ketogenic diet, PKD, from Hungary. And through one of my patients, I got acquainted with them and I started researching them. And then I started doing carnivore myself about, man, has it been 2 years already? Like we say, time is flying. So 2 years ago was my first introduction to carnivore through PKD. And so I've been experimenting with carnivore ever since, kind of, you know, studying, researching, both on myself and on my patients. For me, every way of eating has got to be a therapeutic way of eating in one way or another. Sorry, here I can't speak today. English is not my friend today. But in my practice, it's very important. First of all, like in my practice, I don't see things as like cookie cutter or, you know, one size fits all. It's very individualized and I'm very open-minded to like different solutions or different like tweaks and little modifications that might work for one person or another. That's why the carnivore diet was like a really interesting option for me. I found that there were patients that would never get better, that we couldn't really break through with ketogenic. So ever since I started using carnivore, I've been able to take things to the next level. And I found incredible benefits in using a proper carnivore diet. Just like anything else, you know, you can do carnivore wrong, like you can do keto wrong, you can do anything, you know, but there is a good way to do it. And I think that way is also a little bit different for every person. But yeah, I've been like, and then recently I've been writing a cookbook. It's carnivore recipes cookbook. So that took me for another really deep dive into like the science of the diet and the different aspects that we can use and slight modifications and tweaks that we can use to make it really work for the individual person with individual needs. I think that's it in a nutshell.
Okay, well that's a good introduction. And remind people, where are you from originally? Because you've got it.
Oh yeah, the accent, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm Italian, originally Italian, grew up in Italy, but then I also lived in like 4 different countries. I speak 5 languages. So it's all a big fruit cocktail or meat cocktail in here, the accent and everything.
All right. Well, let me ask you, because you brought up something that's provocative. You said that, people do carnivore right, or the right way. So what can you describe what you mean by that? And what do you mean the right way?
Well, probably for me, it's easier to tell you what I consider the wrong way.
Okay.
And I think that a lot of people want to use any diet as a shortcut to health, or like the magic bullet that will solve it all. Even if I think that in certain cases, carnivore can be the magic bullet that solves a lot of issues. But shortcutting means using like convenience food, processed foods, just eating, out of a package all the time. So like somebody that, for example, would do carnivore and have like salami and like pastrami and like stuff out of the supermarket in a package as their staple, even like, they will like cut corners or use like beef jerky that has other ingredients in it. And they think they're carnivore. I mean, Shani, I don't understand how many times this has happened, especially in the last 3-4 months where, I've been talking about carnivore more. So people approach me and they're like, I've been on a carnivore diet for 3 months. And then I look at their diaries and it's like everything but carnivore, they don't really understand. And then there are all these little things. Also for me, dairy is carnivore. I know this has always been a big debate. It's the big dairy debate for everybody. It's like, it's been like that for keto, and now it's the same for carnivore. But if you want to be a true carnivore in an ancestral way, I personally don't think that dairy belongs in there, especially when it's processed. I mean, if we're talking a little bit of raw milk straight from the cow, that's one thing. But like, like fancy processed cheeses and, like cheeses that include oils that are absolutely not carnivore, that is not a right way for me to do carnivore. So what I think the right way is to like try to do carnivore as much as possible in the ancestral way. And, I like to eat nose to tail. Always done that when I still ate a variety of other things, but I still like to eat my animals, all parts. I don't like to waste. I don't like to waste food, even though I have a dog that will eat the organs and stuff. But, I think that there are parts of the animal that are beneficial and bring certain nutrition. So eating the whole animal, including variety in your carnivore diet, that means that there are a lot of different parts of the animal and can be made in different ways. So carnivore does not ever have to be boring, really. And I prefer, to base my carnivore way in ruminants. So four-legged animals like cows, sheep, venison, bison, I personally don't do well with two-leggeds like chicken, turkey, those kind of things. But that's not to say that for some people they are acceptable, maybe in smaller quantities. So like my right way to do carnivore, and this is like more generic, but I would say, as a generic way, so ruminants and nose to tail, no dairy. And then if we go into my specific way, then I would include some of the PKD style carbs in there, like a little bit of fruit, a little tiny little bit of honey here and there, because as I've been going through perimenopause and finally going through menopause now, I realized that there are benefits to doing carb ups. And, when you're doing carnivores for your gut, especially because your gut flora has been so compromised that it cannot tolerate any fiber at all, we can still do some strategic carb ups that are just targeted to, for example, like, help you sleep better or help your performance training, especially as a woman, like with the menopausal, perimenopausal symptoms. Like it seems like this, like I call them therapeutic carbs, and this is like almost a heresy in the carnivore community. When you start talking about stuff like that, people are like, no, carbs. But again, I come from my clinical practice and clinical experience, and I'm just telling you what I've seen that works. I know there are people like from PKD in Hungary. I've talked to people from the clinic, and they don't agree with me. And they say that if you do PKD right, you'll never need to have carnivores, but they also include them. So it's interesting. I think that like everything, there are different ways to do something. In the end, I think it's really, if you try to do it in the best possible way, but like it's what works for the person. And Sean and I had this conversation on my podcast because I was asking him questions. I was like, Sean, what's your experience with like perimenopausal women? Like, what have you seen? And I know that is a very, specific niche of the population here that we're talking about, but that being my target patient that I work with, for me, it's very relevant. And so I've been like, really experimenting in my clinical practice with this specific segment of the population to try to find that magic sweet spot of we can do carnivore in a way that addresses all their symptoms, because they do need a carnivore diet, and they have all the symptoms that we need to deal with. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's, and I certainly, when I hear somebody say they're going to reintroduce carbohydrate back, now it doesn't bother me at all. I mean, I think ultimately we need to do what works for us individually. Now there's people in the comments, Brett and some others says, no way, hell no, I don't need it. And that's fine too. I mean, I think we need to realize that. Now I can say that, what I have said all along is I don't necessarily think carbohydrates, glucose is an evil thing. I mean, we make glucose, we utilize glucose. Glucose is part of our physiology. It's what it comes packaged with, which can be problematic. And I think this is a distinction. This is why, it's a meat-based diet, and plants are sort of considered as potentially negative. And I think it's the compounds in the plants, not necessarily the glucose or the fructose, the energy source. I think it's honestly, I think it's it's the other stuff that's in there, and maybe even the fiber. And so I think when people say, I'm going to put in, and as Brooke pointed out, there's carbohydrates in dairy, and to a lesser degree in eggs, and to some degree, if you want to include liver in there as a source of carbohydrates. So we still get carbohydrates to some degree. And, the thought that, solving problems using a strict carnivore diet is great, but then thinking that, oh my, you can alter that is somehow now bad. I think that's a little bit, that turns us into a crazy cult. I don't think we want to go there. So I think it's possible to do that. I know people just talk about different things. There's a guy named Don Matisse who talks about the hypercarnivore diet, that he has a lot of fruit and honey included with meat as basically the sort of most of the diet there. And I can certainly say, and I've said all along, I think a pretty good diet for me, just I would say, if I could eat meat and then ice cream or something like that, I mean, that would be my good diet, because I'm like, yeah, I like them both. But again, you have to figure out what is that food doing to you and be objective about it. Now there's some people, and I as I research this stuff and look into this and looking into this stuff, and I see, Kelsey talking about Manuka honey and stuff like that. So if we look at, like, for example, some people will see, glucose rising on a carnivore diet. Now we talk about adaptive glucose sparing, which I think is appropriate. And that's what's going on here. Our muscles start to utilize fat rather than glucose. So we tend to not want the glucose, so it rises in our blood a little bit. And it can happen. It can go up a little bit. If we look at the Inuit, for instance, their average blood glucose was about 120 with fasting. They did not have diabetes. In fact, back in the 1970s and 60s and before, the definition of diabetes was not till you had fasting blood glucose is over 140. So we see that definition has changed with time, and that probably has to do with the probably some other metabolic factors that go on with that. So these people we're seeing that occur, and we see you kind of develop almost a feline physiology or a carnivorous animal physiology. But you see, you probably get a downregulation system called glucokinase, which is the first step that we use to synthesize glucose into glycogen and to fill the liver up. And if the liver gets insulin resistant, then maybe perhaps adding some of those things like fructose or honey, which is kind of a not quite a 50-50 blend of fructose and glucose, but there's some glucose and from some fructose, and depends on the type of honey there is. So it's not, to me, heretical to talk about that stuff at all. I think we need to talk about what works. Some people find that if they start getting a lot of cramps and stuff like that, that adding a small amount of carbohydrate, often in the form of fruit or honey, does seem to help. And you just have to figure out what the effective dose is, what's too much, what's too little. So on and so forth. The same thing with dairy. Again, many people don't do well with dairy, as you pointed out. Some people do okay with it. Okay, so let me ask you, so because you said you've had clients, so tell me about the clients, because this is the thing, we see an evolution here. We see, ketogenic diet, so everybody great on ketogenic diet, and then wait a minute, not everybody's doing great on a ketogenic diet. Many people go to carnivore diet, because they're like, oh, I got better when I went from keto to carnivore, and we see it all the time. I see that repeatedly. And so you're saying, well, what's the problem with the ketogenic diet then? So now there's people who are saying, I'm on a carnivore diet, but I'm still not where I want to be. So now how do you adjust that, and where do you go? So there's this continuous flow of what works. And I say, figure out what works. Don't be afraid to experiment. Now, a lot of people will just do a carnivore diet and they will be happy as can be, and they will be doing fine. And I think it's a very powerful tool, probably one of the most powerful tools out there. And God bless them. Let them keep going. Go as long as they want to, and they can, and they do well, and that's fine. But tell me about your clients that have been struggling. Tell me, because I don't know what you're seeing typically. Are you seeing mostly carnivore people? Are you now seeing just a whole swath of things? I can't remember. Were you ever a plant-based person? Were you ever a vegan, vegetarian, or anything like that? No.
Not me.
More common sense than that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And it's kind of funny, but yeah, I've never done the fully plant-based thing. The closest I ever got was a diet that where I ate kind of like lots of salads, but I would still include meat in there. But I never could sort of give up meat. Yeah. So tell me about your clients. What kind of issues did you have with clients, and how do you solve those? What kind of things are being fixed?
So interestingly enough, I usually get really, most of my cases are really complex cases because, they come to me mainly like sometimes for weight loss or sometimes for hormones, because I specialize in hormones. So I, used to work with thyroid a lot, and now evolving into like even wider, as having had Hashimoto's myself. So I, had to kind of specialize in thyroid and autoimmunity. So I do get a lot of cases that are autoimmune, some sort of autoimmune form, in the body. And then in conjunction with hormones, and of course with a very damaged gut. Sorry for the noise in the background. I have a puppy here in this crate and it's complaining. So they're complex cases because what I find is that there is, when we find there are, first of all, women, it's harder because, again, the hormonal complexity and fluctuations, they are a whole thing in itself that we need to regulate. So when the hormones are dysregulated, and we're talking about, maybe at the ovary level or at the thyroid level, and then at the brain level, pituitary and hypothalamus. So there is a whole dysregulation effect going. And then you combine that to leaky gut. This is something that, it's becoming very common only in the last 10 years since I started studying nutrition. And, starting from Western Price, but seeing the increase in leaky gut and damaged gut has been like staggering. And I really kind of chalk it up to glyphosates and GMO a lot, because like I've been asking myself for years, like, what is it that's going on? And then finally researching glyphosates closer, anybody that will eat this kind of grains and the sprayed products, GMO products, I think is going to end up with a completely trashed gut. So now we have the problems that come from like toxicity in the environment and like xenohormones and like, hormonal pollution, and that will, affect the whole hormonal system for men and women. And we have all that set of issues now, combining them with the gut issues, and then we create a pretty explosive combination where people like start not being able to eat anything, and tried all the diets under the sun, tried the low FODMAP, tried to the elemental diets, ended up on like, I don't know, crazy powders and shakes, and nothing worked. They're still symptomatic. They're not being able to resolve the autoimmune issues. They're not being able to resolve the hormonal issues. And so what do we do at this point? So with this kind of case typology, once I started working with the carnivore diet, I definitely started to make some breakthroughs. And for me, it's almost like carnivore is like the ultimate elimination diet. And so but it's not just an elimination diet. You can do an elimination diet and eat a carrot a day. That's not going to be a healing diet, you know. It's definitely going to be an elimination diet. You're eating one thing. But carnivore really brings it back to the basics of nutrition, of supporting, you know, all the pathways with the proper nutrition. There is not any nutrient really that we cannot get as carnivores. And there has been a lot of debates about vitamin C and, you know, like getting enough vitamin C, but then now the studies are really proving that as we reduce glucose, like, you know, ingesting glucose, then we reduce the need for vitamin C in the body. So with my patients, I usually, when I get cases that are this complex, I start them out, you know, it depends where they're at, because some of them have already messed with the carnivore diet and they don't know how to do it. And some of them come from trying to do keto, and some of them come straight from SAD diets. So depending where they're at, you know, I take them down in increments and like I start reducing things. So get them keto adapted first for maybe a month, and then get them into carnivore for another month, and then getting into like what I call the purest level in my book of carnivore, which is like basically ruminants only, meat and salt, that's it. So we will do this level of diet for maybe 3 months maximum. I try to include nose to tail so that, you know, I try to provide all the nutrients as much as possible. For me, eating liver and bone marrow is really like part of this therapeutic way of doing this elimination carnivore version. And then we start from there. We start seeing where we're at, because healing the gut is the most important thing. So removing, like Sean just mentioned a minute ago, is not just about the carbs, but removing what the carbs come with. So one is like the phytotoxins that come with the plants. But now these days, it's not just the phytotoxins, it's the added toxins to the plants, like say glyphosates. And then it's like all the other toxins that are added to any food that is like, even something just from the supermarket, we don't even know. It could have been irradiated. It could have been sprayed with something like a preservative to keep it on the shelf. Even like, you know, that peach that looks so good, unless it's like really clean, organic, or even from your tree, you don't know anymore what's on that food. And yes, meat maybe is not always clean as we like it to be. We don't always have a choice to get the best grass-fed, clean animals. I think that at this point to get anything clean is pretty much impossible. We messed up our environment enough. But, you know, even with meat that is not organic, if we can balance, you know, and get enough clean grass-fed organic meat in there, and then if we have to have non-organic meat sometimes, it's still a clean enough food that our body is able to handle that level of toxicity that it brings versus everything else piled on top. So it still lets the body go into healing and detox mode by itself. That's what I found. For me, a great indicator that they're ready to move on from carnivore is when they start getting symptomatic. So they're doing great. We switch into carnivore, we do elimination, like gut is healing, symptoms are all getting better. And then strange things start popping up. Like they all of a sudden get constipated. And I'm like, wait, carnivore resolved your constipation. How come like now 6 months later, you're getting constipated again? Well, it means that the gut is been healing and now it's ready to open up a little bit. My personal opinion is that humans are kind of like cockroaches. We're opportunists, you know, we evolved. We needed to be smart to evolve and to support this like big brain we carry around. So we're definitely opportunistic, and we kind of evolved like as a bit of a scavenger as much as hunters. So I think that if we can open our diet to more sources of food and nutrients in a healthy and good balanced way, why not? You know, it's gonna just help us be more flexible. So I really think that once carnivore doesn't serve you anymore, then let's open it up. And I'm not saying open it up maybe to ice cream, maybe to keto ice cream, you know, like with eggs and fresh cream and a little bit of honey, that can be healthy too, and very nutrient dense. You know, I would never open it up to processed foods, to like, you know, donuts and Starbucks, no. For me, that's not really food. If it happens once in a while, okay, don't make yourself wrong and don't like go into a whole tailspin for that. You're gonna clean up and move on. But I think that as long as the staple of our diet includes like foods that are alive, you know, and sometimes you might be able to tolerate some fruit. I do good with some greens. I like heirloom greens. I love my, you know, Italian radicchio and arugula. I grew up with this stuff, and like it actually, my gut likes it. Sometimes I do fermented vegetables. I ferment myself. I do kimchi style. I know that there are phytotoxins in there, but I also think that my body can handle them, especially through fermentation. And when my staple of my diet is actually meat, always. And since I have been experimented with carnivore, it's really transitioned to the staple of my diet being meat. So once that's the foundation, it's kind of like flipping the pyramid upside down. So this is our carnivore pyramid. And I know that some of us in the carnivore world, especially, you know, the cookbook writers or book writers, we created our own carnivore pyramids, but mine is no scale. And then going up is like fats, you know, animal fats. And then like on the top of the pyramid, that last little bit, it's like let's call them Paul Saladino is great also, has a lot of good info, and he calls them like low toxicity plants. I like his definition. And so it gives us a little bit of a breathing room, you know, when we are ready to open up the carnivore diet, once we are mostly healed. And we will never be completely healed, I think, because there's just too much stuff floating around. There is always going to be a toxic challenge that our body is going to have to face. So healed just means that you're strong, you're doing good, you're feeling mostly good, you're sleeping, you're pooping, you know, you're functioning at the best level you can, also for your own history of your body, you know. And then we can bring in those like low toxin carbs, vegetables. I'm really not a grain advocate, so I would probably not open up to grains. Like, I just don't think humans should eat them. You know, we're not ruminants. We don't have 4 stomachs to process and ferment as grains. Even when they're like pre-fermented and like, you know, like sourdough and this and that, I just see how my body reacts. Sometimes I try it and, you know, I'll have a piece of like this amazing organic sourdough and just my body doesn't like it. It's not a question of fermentative bacteria, because I've been eating, you know, I like papaya a lot, and papaya does well with my body, even though it's not local. That sucks. But, you know, I can do the sugar from papaya and not have any bloating, discomfort, you know, gas. But then if I have 3 bites of sourdough, like my belly is just like, yikes. So I just listen to my body. This is like, it's a common sense also, you know, it's just knowing all the science, knowing all the research, then practicing with real people, and then using common sense and listening to what your body is actually telling you that it needs. You know, if I eat too much liver, there is a point where my body is like, yuck, I don't want it anymore. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I need oysters. And then I go through a period where I need to eat oysters like every 2 days, or scallops like 4 times a week. This is about listening, I think, to our body and like varying the diet. Also, like, I think carnivore can be very well varied within the scope of nutrient dense carnivore foods, so that we provide the nutrients that we need. I hope this makes sense for you guys.
Yeah, no, I understand. You know, when you say, so when it's served its purpose and people are having problems, you know, you talked about not going to the bathroom. What has been, how have you had people reintroduce foods? If they've, say they've been on a carnivore diet for a year and they haven't resolved whatever issue they're trying to resolve, or they start to see a relapse of symptoms, maybe it's, you know, I don't know, mood issues or things like that. What are you doing at that point? How do you figure out what to add? Is there stepwise progression of things you start with, or is it just kind of, what do you feel like and try it type of thing?
So usually what starts popping back in is like, in some cases I've seen like constipation. So they're doing great, having great bowel movements for like a year. And all of a sudden, like that changes. And I'm talking, this is for me very specific. It's been to perimenopausal women just heading right at the edges of going into menopause. Things get really tricky. There is about a year right there where it's like, it's a shaky territory. It's like walking a minefield, you know, because like in younger patients or older postmenopausal patients, I actually found less of those issues. But when you hit perimenopause and hormones start going haywire, it's like, you know, at the beginning when I started working with Carnivore, I thought like, oh, this is it, this is great, like it's working, it's fantastic, they're doing so much better. Yes, we got it. And it's suddenly it's like, you know, hot flashes, not sleeping, mood, PMS symptoms, like it just all comes back all of a sudden. So then we started introducing some carbs, and it really depends on what their gut can tolerate. So for some people, we'll start with a little bit of fruit, like organic blueberries and raspberries. Berries are a safe place to start. You know, they have enough sugar in them, but not too much fiber. You know, they're kind of a safe little starting to dip the toe in the carb water. And sometimes I use papaya if they're really, really constipated. It seems like it's something that really helps you move, has a lot of enzymes. For some people, if they had no problems with oxalates and no problem of autoimmunity, maybe we'll do a little bit of like sauerkraut or kimchi and see if their gut reacts well. And also for some people that had no oxalate problems, I might do like a carb up with a sweet potato. And, you know, it depends also their level of activity, if they're working out hard, how their adrenals are doing, if their adrenals are holding up good through perimenopause. If their adrenals are not holding up good, then like starches might help. And I've been debating, I don't know if you know Vanessa Spina. And then there is this other lady who is she's a trainer. And we've been having kind of this dialogue that it started and it got kind of in the thick of it, of the real physiological pathways of why do carb ups help. And I think we've been thrown around a lot of different interesting theories. Like the last one that I heard from them was that the body can only produce so many calories out of fat, can like eat, you know, make so many calories out of fat, and then it has to use glycogen. So if you're using a lot of calories every day, like let's say you're very active, you're an athlete, then you're stressing the body in trying to, you know, make the body produce all those calories from fat or ketones or from its own fat. And so introducing like a very specific small amount of carbs just adds that, you know, that extra, very scientific today, sorry, it's like, today is not a good science day. But it just makes it so that the body is not stressed out by trying to make it endogenously. So we bring it from the outside. So that was a theory. But I've seen this happen in women that don't work out at all. They're absolutely sedentary, especially perimenopausal women with adrenal stress. And I have a lot of those clients. So for me, we're back into the conversation where hormones are involved, where, you know, we really have to look at the endocrine system as a whole, and, you know, including pancreas and including insulin into the endocrine balance. It's a really complicated affair. So if you ask me for a straight correlation between like, how does a carb up affect this symptom? Sometimes I can't tell you. I just know it works. You know, it's very humbling because I like to have all the answers and sound really smart, you know, but sometimes the body just has a way that I've seen it happen over and over, and it's pretty consistent. So I will try, and 90% of my patients that are perimenopausal, that works, great. And if it doesn't work, guess what? Then we'll try something else. Sometimes it's about more fat. So they're just like, you know, they're getting constipated, something is happening. So we just need to really up the fat and use the good fats, like lots of suet and, you know, lots of even raw fat, or maybe more raw meat. I've been recently experimenting in like including more raw meat, especially beef, you know, and liver, raw liver. And what that does, how does that change the way you feel on carnivore? You know, there are so many possibilities, and like it's kind of fun and interesting to explore them. But again, for me, it's like there is no cut and dry answer for everybody. It's just like what in every individual person responds to. So we'll usually go through the steps of like, okay, we'll try this and see. No, that doesn't work. Okay, now we'll try this. I also do muscle testing. So that helps me sometimes. Muscle testing, I feel, is about 80% correct, maybe 70 sometimes. It helps me decide on things that I want to test, but ultimately the body will tell you what works or not. So that's how we go about it.
Yeah, sometimes it's a challenge getting people just to objectively, you know, pay attention to what's going on. And the nice thing about a carnivore diet is you've eliminated almost all variables outside of meat, you know, with very, very rare exception. And so when you do decide, if you decide you're going to try to reintroduce foods for whatever reason, whether it's just because you want to do it or because you're not getting what you want out of carnivore, then you have to really be objective about it. What do you do? Because there's people that say, you know, I can't do honey. I can't do keto ice cream. If I do that, I'm going to be on that slippery slope where I'm going to be, you know, just binging. So how do you get people? I mean, you know, and again, I will say this again and again, you do what you need to do to stay healthy and sane. But there are people that will, for whatever reason, just say, oh, well, I'm just going to do this for the heck of it. And then they end up 6 months later, they've gained 20 pounds, they've regained all their symptoms, and they're back to square one. So how do you avoid that when you try to reintroduce a little bit of food back in? How do you avoid them going off the deep end and going, you know, just hog wild, so to speak?
Yeah, I would use two different strategies there. The first one, I would try to maybe introduce carbs that are not sweet. So instead for them, I wouldn't do fruit or anything that really elicits that sweet flavor. We might try with like maybe like some cooked low toxicity vegetables, like, I don't know, like maybe cooked radicchio or like, you know, a cassava root, like cooked, or, you know, a sweet potato, again, depending on their history of like what was their symptoms, but something that is not specifically sweet. Like I know that addictive pathway because I've been through it. I have it, you know, and like, especially like I remember after being strict for months, having a bite of something sweet and feeling my brain turn on fire and be like, more, you know, like you suddenly, that pathway that was like silent for so long just rears up its head and it's ugly. So I would try to avoid that because, like, you know, even doing ketos, one of the things I do is like I try to avoid the taste sweet, sugary sweet for my patients to reset that brain pathway. So I would avoid sweets and do carbs in a savory way. The other thing one thing that I do in my practice is like I explore roots of disease that are beyond just the physical. So we might look at emotional components that need to come up on the pathways of addiction and comfort eating, and maybe send them to some specific resources that are beyond my ability for that. But, you know, when it comes to like addictive eating, just look a little bit of their emotional side of why they're going there and support them in that way as well. Because, like, you know, you can remove the temptation, but a lot of times people with this kind of addictions, they'll stop binge eating, they'll go on carnivore, but then they'll start another addiction. Maybe, you know, they'll start gambling, or like addicted to social media. Like that's another longer story, but I tend to look at the root causes and try to observe and bring people into balance as much as they can, and being like, in a good place with themselves, which also leads to like in a good place with their foods and their exercise, and all their life habits.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable approach. Let me ask you about, because you mentioned, having thyroids, Hashimoto's, and there's a question about Graves' disease, which is kind of a little bit different situation, autoimmune, where you have overstimulation. How do you manage thyroid? What's the thing with thyroid with you? Because you see that a lot, particularly it seems to be more prevalent among women, and then certainly as they get perimenopausal, it seems to come up more and more, and there's always a concern about thyroid function, weight gain, or lack of weight loss. How do you handle the thyroid?
Well, definitely first step is like through the diet and food. So eliminating, like, I think it's really important to eliminate all the thyroid antagonist foods, like for example oxalates, goitrogens, etc. So that's a good step. I also, two other things. One is like, those are principles of nutrition. So you eliminate the toxins. So we need to detox the thyroid. A lot of times autoimmunity in the thyroid, I've recently had 2 Graves cases that were so extremely similar, but then the root causes were completely different, so we need to find what is causing the problem and then like go and eliminate it. So one of them was parasites. Actually, she had like severe dysbiosis fueled by, a lot of bread and a lot of gluten, which created leaky gut. And then the gluten that she was eating created like the molecular mimicry that caused her Graves, her autoimmunity. That was one case. And the other case was parasites. And what else did she have? Parasites and heavy metals combined. So the parasites created the leaky gut, then the heavy metal compounded the leaky gut, and then she was eating, again, stuff that with the molecular mimicry went to her thyroid. But most of the times, the thyroid gets attacked when the thyroid's unhealthy and toxic. A lot of people who had amalgam fillings, that percolates down into your parotid gland and then down into your thyroid. Then it ends up, all the chemicals from the fillings slowly make the thyroid sick, meaning like they go enter the cells of the thyroid. The cells are not functioning and optimal. They start like dying, becoming necrotic, shedding DNA into the bloodstream, and starting the autoimmune process. So really, there is no like one solution. We just really have to look at what caused the issues in the thyroid and then going to clean up those original issues. So removing the heavy metals, fixing the gut, here we are again, removing all those different things and foods that are thyroid antagonists. So doing a, mostly carnivore or strict carnivore, it's definitely a great first step. And then what I do is like I detox them. I use specific supplements that are extracts of thyroid DNA. They're not whole gland because like that's supposedly not allowed, only by doctors, but yeah, so using supplementation to provide healthy DNA so the thyroid can start healing itself, and then like slowly draining out and cleaning up whatever, toxicity is in the thyroid itself. And it's kind of the same for every other organ in the body. And then we need to just, again, balance with the other endocrine organs, and especially the thyroid, the gut, and the liver. Liver is where most of the thyroid hormones are converted, and in the gut. So if we don't have those two systems functioning, then the thyroid will never be able to catch up, because like the feedback loop, the hormonal feedback back loop is never gonna get back into balance.
Okay, that's fair enough. Trying to see if anybody had any other questions. I'm gonna look through here, see if anything has anything. Um, are you, so as in, remind me, Vivica, were you an RD or a nutritionist? What was your background training in?
No, not at all. I don't have a license.
Okay.
I chose to not have a license so that I didn't have to like, have the restraints of having a license. And I think, Sean, having been a doctor, and I read your story in your book, and like all the ordeals with like, having to deal with the regulating authorities. So I chose to be a free agent. I am a nutritionist, certified nutritionist, but I just studied with, like all the professionals, and like I have a lot of mentors, and I took a lot of seminars, and I studied along the doctors and the chiropractors. I you know I just, because of the environment that we are living in more than ever today, and I'm not going to get into this, but I feel like a lot of our freedoms are being like taken. And there is a lot of regulation by the medical industry, the pharmaceutical industry. I want to be able to do what it takes to heal my patients. So that's why I chose to be a free agent, because a lot of times what I need to do to heal my patients is like not what the doctor would do or the doctor would go against. And also one of my big goals is to get people off the meds they don't need. Sometimes it's like 1 out of 10 that you really need of medication, but the doctors give them freely. And then, they give meds to counterbalance the symptom of the other meds. I have currently a 17-year-old patient that she was on like 5 or 6 medications, 17-year-old. And like most of her medication is what caused the symptoms, and now we're trying to heal. So that's why I do what I do, how I do it. And, it's a choice.
Yeah, I was just, the reason I was asking was, I was wondering if you had feedback from those in your community, if you kind of have a community of other certified nutritionists that complain or disagree with what you say, and do you have a lot of negativity directed toward you because you're recommending, either fully meat-based diets or mostly meat-based diets as a treatment option?
Luckily, not really. I used to be also much more like out there in the media and social media, my blog. And so the more visible you are, of course, the more controversy. But I became more, kind of working in a more subtle way. So I don't have time for that, really. I'm so busy with like my practice, helping my patients, being there for them, and then like writing the book. And there is always something going on. So I really don't have time for that. And I honestly ignore most of the people that, and I just tell them, you're free to believe what you believe. I do what I do. If you don't like it, goodbye. That's the door. And, we're friends, but just go do your thing, I do mine. There are people that need what I do, and they will find me and I will help them. I don't force anybody. I don't force my way upon people, and also I don't like promote it as like my beliefs, like kind of, sometimes I wish I could just like shout it to the winds, but again, it's like, I am, my spiritual beliefs, a lot of my patients are Christians and very fundamentalist even, and I'm not. And so I'm just respectful and, let them do their thing, I do mine. And the same is for like our, eating beliefs and healing beliefs. My assistant is vegan, okay? That says it all. She's like my social media manager, and I love her to death, and she's vegan. And I'm just like, you know what? If you will see the light one day, great. And if you want, that's great too. This is your life journey. You gotta do what you gotta do. And we get along.
Yeah, and I think there's nothing wrong with that. As you allow choice. Like I said, adults can eat what they want, but just in the I guess I think it was the UK, some of the major press, there was a big article talking about that we must tax junk food, meat, and dairy to save people's health, and this is prompted by, trying to get people healthier, people concerned about coronavirus. And, we see a lot of legislation and policy being passed kind of hurriedly because of this coronavirus stuff. And I just worry that someone might actually take this person seriously. And this is 200 doctors, and this is head up by some gal who's a physician. Well, she's a PhD that's part of the plant-based, I don't know, physician network or whatever she's calling it. Does that bother you that they're saying, well, you're saying do what you want, do it works for you, everybody gets along, and yet at the same time we have people saying we need to start taxing meat, taxing dairy, taxing junk food. Are you concerned about that?
I'm not opposed to taxing junk food. It's probably good. What I think is that, for me, the big lesson of these times, and by the way, they just took down my coronavirus YouTube video. I saw it this morning and I was like, oh yeah, censorship is real. I just talked about, I had a video about what do I do if I get sick with coronavirus. Gone. Whatever. I think there are other channels, and I really think that our lesson from this time, it's long overdue and long in the coming. And it's about reestablishing our relationship with nature and with the economy and with the way that we feed ourselves in general, but at the very root. So for me, it's going back to the basics and a lot cutting out the middleman. If we all, or most of us at least, I know a lot of people live in the cities, it's harder to do those, and just cut out the middleman and go back to your farmers and support farmers markets, support, meat producers, ranchers. Just go, I know, Sean, you work with some, ranches and meat producers, and you recommend them and ways to find good sources of meat. If we all did that directly and really try to limit government involvement or supermarket involvement, I know that even that is strictly regulated. And look at the stuff that's happened during coronavirus, where the pig slaughterhouses had thousands of pig carcasses go to waste because of corona and regulation, and they could not be sold straight to the farmers or from the farmers. It was another one of those things that just make you go regulation and bureaucracy. So maybe it's good. Let them do that and make people angry, so people will finally wake up. The more it's in your face, the more freedom they take away, the more they push into a corner. Maybe it's what we need to finally wake up and get out of our comfort zone and start being oh wait, something is happening here. So how do we do it instead? Are we going to just sit here? I mean, for me, even protesting and rioting honestly doesn't do much. We need to create alternatives, and yes, I think that having people who are involved in the politics and the regulations and opting for better policy, that's helpful. That's their path, and definitely for me, it's very foreign and alien. I work more with my choices. So I work more with going to the farmer myself and making friends with them and, getting all the good stuff from them, that is not legally allowed, the brains that you're not legally allowed to eat pretty much or sell. Even the meat processors, they're oh no, we can't sell you the brains, no way. So I need to go to the farmer to get my brains, and be there when they kill the animals. So for me, it's about being more active and proactive in your choices yourself. If we did that, instead of being all wrapped up and freaking out about, all those news, and every single one of us just did something in our lives, I think that things will actually change a lot faster. But I'm kind of a grassroots person, and I believe in personal power more than delegating. I grew up as a little anarchist in Italy, so I don't trust government so much, and I'm a bit of a rebel, as you can tell. That's just my way.
Yeah, I think you're probably joined by many people in this community. I think most of us have kind of decided that some of the government interventions in a lot of things, a lot of parts of our lives, particularly nutrition, have resulted in less than ideal results. And so that's why a lot of us are here. So I don't think you're, you know, in unfamiliar territory for sure. I'll tell you what, Vivica, it was wonderful speaking with you. We've just about gone through our hour of time that we usually use. Can you let us know how to find out more about you, or where people can go to talk to you and stuff? I know you got the Nourished Caveman, and I've asked you about that before because you're a woman and yet it's a caveman, but that's okay. You know,
Italian translation, yeah.
that's all right. So tell us how to get a hold of you.
So it's the nourishedcaveman.com, but I think I'm kind of changing identities. I'm trying to, and have a new website soon. In the meantime, I think people can just email me directly through Vivica at thenourishedcaveman.com. If you want to just follow my work, I'm on Facebook, the Nourished Caveman page. Whatever videos YouTube has left up on my channel, YouTube, it's also the Nourished Caveman. And then there is Instagram as well. But if you have questions for me or you want to work with me, I think the best way is I just email me, Vivica at the Nourished Caveman, and I read all my emails and answer them personally.
Well, thank you so much. All right, guys, everybody, happy Friday. You guys enjoy the weekend. I'll see some of you guys tomorrow in the morning meeting. Otherwise, you guys have a great weekend and stay safe, stay strong, keep spreading the message around, and we'll just keep growing. Thanks so much, Vivica. Have a great day.
Thank you, Sean.
Okay, bye-bye, guys.
Bye.